This is the Triangle Talk Show. Episode, I'm not even sure I'm going to do episode numbers, but for this one, we'll call it 0.0 because it's the very beginning. And the only reason I'm recording this, and I'm promising myself I'm going to do this in one take and just do it, is because I need some audio to forward on to iTunes, to Apple Podcasts, to get in their system and out there in podcast land. So that's why I'm recording some stuff here. My name is Gary Pierce, and if you go to the website, triangletalkshow.com, brand new website. Well, first of all, no one's listening to this because there's no way for the word to get out to anybody to hear it, at least not as it's being initially put out into the world. There's nobody out there to hear it. I expect if I leave this online, and my ego tells me that I will, that eventually some folks will come around here and say, what was the first thing he put out there? Okay, so that's where we stand right now. No one is hearing this. I'm Gary Pierce, and if you go to the website, triangletalkshow.com, and check out the About tab, you'll discover that no, I'm not that Gary Pierce. That Gary Pierce that I'm referring to is a Democratic political consultant, has been for a long time. He's got a blog going with another political consultant named Carter Wren. And while I've been here in the Triangle, in the Raleigh, Durham, and I live in Cary, well, I've been here since 1990, so I've been here 28 years. I immediately bumped into him in terms of getting his phone calls because he wasn't listed. He wasn't easy to find. And suddenly I was. So, he's a major Democratic consultant, and I would get phone calls from the networks. Whenever something big happened in North Carolina, I would get phone calls from the networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN. Are you Gary Pierce? Yes, I am. Well, we would like to do an interview with you. Oh, okay. No, I'm not that Gary Pierce. And I think I discovered him by seeing my name in the newspaper pretty early on. Saying, no, not me. I'd also gotten in the newspaper and on the TV stations because I'd been in the publicity game for a hobby that I've been in for a long time, ham radio. So I got here to Raleigh, arrived in 1990, didn't know anybody, and I had been this ham radio guy since I was 15 years old, back in the 1960s. And I used ham radio as a way to get to know people here in town. And since I knew media, again, the website will explain a little bit of my background. I knew media from the technical end of things. I've been a video editor for my career. But I've been sort of a wannabe or off to the side journalist as well. Written newsletters, articles, done some disc jockeying off and on, mostly off, a little bit on. And wanted to do that sort of thing, but made my living pushing the buttons and mostly making commercials. So I had started to develop some media awareness, the media being aware of me. None of the reporters that I communicated with in terms of trying to do publicity for the ham radio thing ever asked me if I was that Gary Pierce, the Democratic consultant guy. It just occurred to me. None of them ever asked me that. But I did get the phone calls from the major networks, and I just had to tell them, nope, I'm not that Gary Pierce. Now what? Okay, so I'm not that guy. Who am I? Well, it explains on the website. The Triangle Talk Show, something I've been thinking about doing for a long time. Yes, I'm that wannabe. I would say wannabe disc jockey, because back in the day when I was getting my feet wet in media, when I was a kid, when I was, had this desire to do something, there weren't very many talk shows. And I didn't listen to them. I listened to wise guys who played music, or not so wise guys who read weather reports and played music. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I got a chance to do that early on at a small radio station in Wisconsin, and discovered when I turned on the mic after the first record of my first shift, I didn't have anything to say. I didn't know what to do. I had no training in doing that sort of thing. So that initial attempt at a radio career was kind of a flop. And now a lot of people in the radio business eventually discovered that they didn't like playing records and reading the time and temperature and commercials and then more music, another 50-minute music sweep. So I didn't want to do that either. And talk radio got invented. It wasn't by those guys. It was, some genius program director who discovered there'd be a market for that. I think it was when FM radio had totally kicked AM radio's butt and took over, and they needed to do something with their AM stations, which didn't sound very good playing music, but sounded okay with people just talking. So, talk radio was invented. I'm not going to go into it now, but I had a chance back in the mid-'80s to actually do a talk show on a radio station that wasn't in a tiny market. It wasn't in a major market, but it wasn't in a tiny market. It's in Peoria, Illinois. Will it play in Peoria? Well, I almost had a chance to play in Peoria, and for reasons that I will explain someday if we get around to it, but I'm not going to take the time right now. I didn't take that job, and I hadn't. How did I explain this? I applied for it because I saw it advertised in Broadcasting Magazine, which is what everybody read to try to find. Well, Broadcasting Magazine and Radio and Records, and I never read Radio and Records because I couldn't afford it. So Broadcasting Magazine, if you had a radio station and you wanted to find somebody, you put a classified ad in the back. And the station in Peoria did. And I applied and just sat in my apartment in Chicago. And yes, I'm from Chicago, long ago. Sat in my apartment in Chicago and talked into a tape recorder for 45 minutes straight, just like this. I apparently have that skill. Just sat there and talked. Not sure what I talked about. I don't think I've got that tape because I think I sent them the tape unedited, just, here it is. And so I don't have it anymore. And apparently that impressed them because they needed to hire a guy that could sit there and do that on their radio station at night from 7 until 9 p.m. And maybe they weren't getting a lot of people submitting applications for that job that could actually do that. They called me, went in for an interview. They offered the job. So I think they sort of offered the job. And at that point, I had something else I really wanted to do first. I wanted to leave my cushy video editing job in Chicago, making pretty good money. So I'm not sure why I felt I couldn't afford Radio and Records. I wanted to leave the cushy editing job in Chicago where I was doing pretty good. And I wanted to do this radio thing. But first, I wanted to take a summer-long motorcycle trip. And that was important to me. And this job opportunity in Illinois came up, in Peoria, came up just as I was getting ready to do that. And the timing was bad. Well, there's one other thing. I'm a drug addict. I was a pothead. The background on that is also a longer story than I want to tell right now. All of this is a longer story than I wanted to tell right now. But, it's the Triangle Talk Show. So talk is what it's all about. I was a pothead and had been for about 8 years at that point. It's part of the reason why I wanted to leave the job, because it was consuming me more and more. And I wasn't really paying attention to the world, to politics, to stuff going on. I read the newspaper every day, but not the news, some columns and the comics, and I wasn't really aware of what was going on. And I sort of wanted to use this motorcycle trip to clear my head and to stop smoking pot, stop doing any kind of drugs. I was also drinking more than I wanted to. So I wanted to take this trip and do that. Anybody out there who's got any awareness of addiction will know that the trip, which I eventually took, failed on that count. It succeeded on many counts. I took a countrywide motorcycle trip, border to border up into Canada. Didn't go into Mexico because I was carrying pot. I was kind of afraid to cross the border. And so that was a great trip. But the opportunity for the talk show, which would have been life-changing, came too early. If it had come at the end of this trip, it probably would have been good. But it came at the beginning, and I eventually said, pretty quickly actually said, nope, I got something else I want to do first. They said, okay, we're disappointed. Be careful what you ask for. Because I guess I really didn't expect an audition, much less a job offer out of looking into this job. So I had that opportunity, and I lost it. I don't know if I could say I blew it, but I lost it. And took the motorcycle trip, failed to quit using drugs. Did get a radio job at the end of it. I finished up the end of that. I moved out of Chicago. I actually moved in with my dad, who was down in Pinehurst, or Whispering Pines. So that's how I ended up here in North Carolina for a little while, and applied for more radio station jobs. And I got one out in Arizona, and I went out there this would be 1987, and spent about 3 months working at a little radio station in the town of Lake Havasu City. It was a disc jockey, pure disc jockey job. It was talking a little bit and playing music. I got put in as the morning show guy for a while because the owner who was doing the morning show had something else he needed to do for a few months. I think he kind of presented it to me like I was going to be the morning show guy, and didn't tell me that it was a time-limited offer. And I'd go back to being the midday matinee idol. But that is what happened. The morning show was more talk, and the opportunity to work with a couple other guys, a newsman and a weather guy, and do some interviews and things I hadn't had much experience doing. That was a lot of fun. And in that first DJ job in Wisconsin, the first little station where I was so terrible, I was kind of afraid that I would still be terrible. And without really having any additional experience, just the passing of a little more than a decade, I wasn't too bad. I've got tapes, and if I edit them together selectively, which I did in order to try to get the next job, I sound pretty good. If you listen to the tapes all the way through of all the stuff that I recorded, it was uneven. Some of it was pretty good, but not all of it. So that job lasted 3 months. I actually got fired for talking too much and for talking about the wrong things, which is in the radio business generally considered to be career enhancement. If you're going to apply to the next job, you apply to one where you think that talking too much and about the wrong things is going to be an asset. And it can be. Some program directors will look at other program directors and say, yeah, that guy just didn't understand the raw talent. So they fired this guy, but we are going to pick him up. It happens all the time. Maybe not quite at the level that I was working on. So I did that for the 3 months, and then the drugs and alcohol were catching up to me really bad. So I got scared and went to AA, and I've been what they call clean and sober ever since sometime I think in February 1988. So a little over 30 years now. Yay for me. I went back to doing video. I applied after that. I applied to a radio station for radio station jobs at a bunch of stations, and one offered me a job actually here in the East, up in the Charlottesville area, in a country station. I'm not a big country music. I don't hate country music. I like some of it, but a steady diet of it's not to my taste. So I had applied to those in that station up in the Charlottesville area, made an offer. And I had also been applying to video production companies, and one in Knoxville made an offer. And I took the video job because it paid 3 times as much as the radio job. Small radio stations pay peanuts. Video production companies pay living wages. And I went there to Knoxville, Tennessee, worked there for, 6 months or so. Didn't really fit in well with the culture and the people, and eventually got fired, and found a video editing job in Raleigh with a company here in Raleigh. And I kind of wanted to be in this area because, again, my dad was down in Whispering Pines. He was retired and getting on. My grandmother was down there, and she was really getting on. She was in her 90s. So I took the video editing job in Raleigh, worked for that company for a decade, from 1990 to 2000, maybe 2001, then went freelance and did a lot more audio work than video work, and even got some voiceover work. And the big voiceover job that I got was for Travelocity. I was the guy back in 2006, 2007 on their radio and TV commercials. I was the guy. I wasn't the roaming gnome, the British voiced little gnome with the red hat. That's that started to be back then their little icon, and still is today. I wasn't that guy. I was the announcer that talked to him. And it started out, Travelocity presents the roaming gnome, denouncer of travel myths, and went on from there. So I was that guy. That's the biggest thing I've ever had happen in terms of career enhancement. And it paid really well for a few years. So, but mostly I was doing the video editing. As you can tell, have you been, oh, wow, my English is failing me. As you've been listening to this for, how long are we in now? Is my thing telling me? It's not telling me. Staring at my computer screen trying to figure out how long this has been going on. Too long, I know. And now where was I? Oh, as you can tell, I like to talk, like to do this sort of stuff. My head is clear. I've been paying more attention to politics, but not as much as I'd really like to have been. I am now officially retired. As I was doing the freelance, and the freelance was winding down, I had ramped up, again, if you watch or read the website, triangletalkshow.com. I've been in this ham radio thing, and I did some documentaries using my video skills and my wannabe announcing skills to do some documentaries, and then pivoted that to a podcast. And the podcast had been moderately successful. Ran 6 years, almost 400 episodes, and it was called Ham Radio Now. Still on at hamradionow.tv. Took on a co-host. And when I decided I wanted to do this and couldn't do both, I handed the podcast, the Ham Radio Now podcast, over to my co-host. And he's been doing it solo now since about, first of the year. I'll still appear there every now and then because I'm still doing the ham radio thing. And I'm a star in that world. I'm a big star. So I really wanted to do this. And the reason I wanted to do this, and I'm probably going to repeat this on other shows probably many times, is that when Donald Trump was elected, I was disappointed. And that is, mild version of, the way to describe it. When I moved to North Carolina, I registered Democrat. And then after a few years, I re-registered as unaffiliated. I think that's the official term, not independent, but unaffiliated. Because I didn't want the Democrats to, as if anybody was paying attention to how I registered to vote, I didn't want the Democrats to take me for granted. Because although all of my political leanings are generally liberal, tending to the left, not all of them are. And I like to maintain some independence, and I don't want to be just, automatically counted. As it turns out, in North Carolina, like it was in Illinois, if you're unaffiliated, you can vote in either primary by declaring what ballot you want to take. If you are a registered Democrat or Republican, you can only get the ballot for that party. And so if you look at my voting records, which you can, I can look up yours and you can look up mine, you'll see that in the last primary a couple of years ago, I took a Republican ballot because I was pretty sure that Hillary Clinton was going to be nominated. And although it made a difference to me whether it was Clinton or Sanders, I wasn't a Hillary Clinton Democrat. I considered her to be the probably more capable person of actually running the country. That was a quaint thought today. But I wasn't too worried about which way it went. I also thought that she had a better chance of winning. There's another quaint thought. So I took a Republican ballot and voted for, I think it was for Kasich, because I really didn't want Trump to get the nomination. It was sort of a protest vote because I thought he was pretty much of an idiot. And so you'll see that I took a Republican ballot. Of course, you don't get to see who I voted for in elections. Votes are secret. It's a secret ballot. Beyond that, you couldn't see which one I voted for. You could only see that I took a Republican ballot. And I can see that from you. All those records are public. And if I were more prepared for doing this, I would have the website to tell you about right now. But it's easy to find. The Wake County Board of Elections, I think, is what to put in your Google. So I was disappointed. And then we got to Inauguration Day. And, that was somewhat painful to watch for me. And for some of you, listening, it was thrilling to watch. And the next day, there were the women's marches. And that was awesome. Absolutely restoring hope. And, being old, I'm 68. Being old, I pretty much figured, okay, well, yeah, you got that out of your system. And that was fun, but it's not going anywhere. Well, it's kept on going. Not all day, every day, but the idea of Donald Trump is not the president that many of us want in terms of the popular vote, apparently. Sure, you can argue the details of the popular vote, what was rigged and what wasn't. But apparently, the popular vote, a little bit more of us didn't want Donald Trump than did. So, pretty divided. And his popularity in the polls still sits in the hovering a little bit around 40%. So, not terrible by a lot of historical measures, but still, not very popular. But a lot of people love him. And so at that point, I thought, well, what can I do to help move things in the direction that I want, assuming I can even figure out what direction I want to see things go. What do I know how to do? I know how to make television programs, but I don't really like doing that. It's a lot of work and kind of boring. I know how to do podcasts. I know how to talk. That's not a lot of work, or at least it doesn't have to be. And if I do things right, it will turn out not being a lot of work and not necessarily all that boring. In fact, it could be pretty much fun. In fact, let me describe it this way. It's not really the truth, but it is a good description of what I feel when I'm sitting in front of the microphone talking about stuff. It goes back to something I heard on an interview in the past couple of years from one of the Walenda guys, the flying Walendas, the guys on the tightrope. And what they said was, life happens when you're on the wire, when you're walking across the tight wire. That is living. Everything else is waiting. Okay, so when I'm doing a show, especially when I've got guests to talk to or someone to banter with, but even just sitting here monologuing, that's fun. It's not like everything else in my life is just waiting, but sort of like that. All right, so that was over a year ago, the Women's March. What took me so long? Well, I had this Ham Radio Now show to let go of. Don't want to say get rid of, but to let go of. And other things in life just kept me busy. And I will admit that I am not efficient. I am really inefficient. I am retired. I spend most mornings in the home gym working out. Got a few productive hours in the afternoon, and I don't like working at night, although I will when I have to. And so it just took a long time to get ready to do this. And the first thing I did was register the domain, triangletalkshow.com. Kind of surprised I could get something like that. Looked around to see what other people were doing. There are other shows that are something like what I got planning. My phone is telling me I've got a call.
5, 4.
Don't want to talk to them right now. It didn't really prepare to talk this long, or I would have muted the phone. Now I forgot where I was again. And I'm not going to edit this. This goes out the way it is, which is part of that not working too hard thing. And I'm not getting back to where I was. That's out of the brain. Let me wrap this up. The show is, again, if you look at the website, the initial plan is to do some politics, which I've already sort of stepped into on this 0.0 episode. Some politics, but not all. And the politics part, there's plenty of yelling and screaming going on TV, on the cable networks. Oh, yeah, I was saying that I'd looked around to see what other people were doing. And there are other shows like this. Yeah, it did come back to me. There are other shows. But nothing quite like what I'm thinking of doing. And I don't mind being competition. So some politics, but I'm going to try real hard to not be the yelling and screaming kind. I think, as you can tell already, my on-air persona is fairly calm, laid back. Won't always be, but most of the time. And this is going to be the hardest part to actually get done this way. When I'm bringing people on the show to interview, politicians or other people that are doing other interesting things, and I want to talk to them on the show, assuming I can get anybody to be on there. And, right now there's nobody listening and little incentive for anybody to come on here other than if they listen to this and say, this guy seems to have some talent. And maybe, that's certainly going to be in the ear of the beholder. This guy might be someone I'd be willing to take a chance on a fledgling podcast and work with, appear. Why not? What's it going to cost me? An hour of my time. So let's do it. Hopefully we'll get some folks that are willing to do that. And then eventually, if we build up an audience, and then I can say, there's going to be 500, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people listening to you. 10,000 is not likely. Most radio stations in this market don't have 10,000 people listening at one time. But although, with a podcast, you can build up to that. A few of my Ham Radio Now shows got audiences that big. A few got audiences 30, 40, 50, 60,000, but most of them were in the 1,000 to 2,000 range. So that's what I'm used to. If I can bring some of those folks on, well, they're going to want to do their pitch, especially politicians. They're going to want to do their stump speech, or they're going to fight. And I'm going to try to just have a conversation and not let them do their stump speech and not let them do, I'll ask a question I want to know something about. And, a good politician will pivot that question into the next part of their speech. They might even totally ignore the question. And you've heard this and you've seen it over and over again. But, I don't know if I've got the skill to turn them around and stop them without totally offending them and making them go away, but we'll find out. So and the other part is finding people to talk to you about other stuff, because there's a lot going on in the triangle, a lot I don't know about, a lot I'd like to know about. One of my skills, one of my advantages is curiosity. I don't want to do everything there is going on, but I want to know about it. And I'm kind of good at getting people to talk about that. So we'll find out. All right, I'm going to wrap this up, and this will be it for episode 0.0 of the Triangle Talk Show. I'm Gary Pierce, trying very hard not to say my ham radio call sign, because that's why I always ended the old Ham Radio Now show, is with my call sign. I'm Gary Pierce, and this is the way that I always ended the Ham Radio Now show, and I am going to keep this tradition alive. Thanks for listening. Over and out.